Let's do it.
All right, so we are going to be going live for the first time, looking at Week 2 DraftKings pricing. Josh nor I have looked at the slate at all, so we're kind of just going off of feel from yesterday's show where we did the FanDuel first look as well for Week 2. This will be posted on YouTube, so guys, if you do not catch this part of the stream or can't stay for the whole thing, it'll be uploaded to YouTube on Wednesday morning. Make sure to like and subscribe. Again, that is RotoRadar Daily Fantasy Sports on YouTube. You should be able to find it as well as all of our morning streams and specific segments of this afternoon stream where we cover NFL DFS. Let's go and look at this quarterback range, Josh, because we kind of went and discussed a lot of these game scenarios yesterday. Went a little bit in depth on a lot of them, but here we have DraftKings pricing, obviously different from FanDuel, different strategies, different ways to go about things and combinations to assess. So we have Kyler Murray here, one of the best QB options of the week, sitting at 8,200 on DraftKings. Personally, I feel like this is way too low of a price tag for what he can do. The main thing for me here is this rushing yards number that I think is actually a little bit of an anomaly. And I will overreact to this and say that I think that this is going to be something we rely on more than we did last week. You only got 2 points out of him. Oh, I shouldn't say that. You got the rushing touchdown too. So you got 8 DraftKings points for Kyler Murray on the ground. I do think that it's actually is around that range, but I'm not always going to bank on the touchdown. So Josh, talk to me a little bit about Kyler, his price tag, and then some of these guys in the. We only have 2 quarterbacks that are in the 7K range this week.
Yeah, the upside is immense on Kyler Murray, right? And at this price tag, I feel like it's a pretty good price tag. You're looking for 2.5x here, and I think it's kind of easy for him to get 2.5x, honestly, at 8.2, even with the price tag going up from 7,600. Like you said, kind of an anomaly with the rushing attempts. Could end up being a lot more. He only had 5. I think in a close game, you could see 8 to 12. And if it's 8 to 12, then that would be absolutely insane to see how many rushing yards he could have, especially because, like we talked about yesterday, this is a guy who looks confident when he's running. It's a guy who, when he's running, he looks like he has a full steam and he has a lot of speed on him. So I think he can almost beat anyone on the defensive side when it comes to his speed. And that's just insane to think about what he can do with that speed. So I think Murray's kind of setting himself up, at least from week 1, for like an MVP type performance of throughout the whole entire year. And if that's the case, then this is someone that you got to consider week in, week out, and especially against the Minnesota defense that we just got torched by Joe Burrow. So I don't know. I like the Murray price tag. I don't think 8,200 is too much. I think it's honestly just right.
I think so too. I don't think it's too much. I think they probably could have priced him at 85, 86, and I still would think he's one of the best plays on the slate. We have to find value, obviously, with that, but compared to the quarterbacks around him and the matchups that are there, I think it's clearly Kyler as the cash game option for week 1, or for week 2, excuse me. But you do have Russell Wilson sitting here at 75. They did let Russ cook in the first matchup, and now he gets a Tennessee team like we talked about with Kyler that he was able to kind of do whatever he wanted. Josh Allen, $1,000 separates him from Kyler. If you told me that last week, I'd probably side with Josh Allen, but obviously that offense didn't look very good. I think that Josh Allen does have the MVP caliber season, but he's already kind of down in a hole, and this matchup isn't as good as the one he had. I don't know. I think it's a slight upgrade in terms of Steelers versus Miami for him, but it's still something that I have to monitor moving forward. Yeah, I mean, it's clearly Kyler for me. I can see where you'd want to go Russ and GPPs. That's totally fine. Let's move down the list here. Tom Brady. Did you see what he posted on social media about the Falcons and 328?
I saw bits and pieces, but honestly, I started hitting my timeline as soon as we went live for the MLB show. So I'm sure Sean would have been mad at me if I was looking over on Twitter to try to figure out what they were talking about. But if you want to update me, go for it.
Yeah, his social media skills are top tier. They're S tier. He specifically timed. I don't remember the specifics necessarily, but I think he timed in the video when it hit 328. He made like a zoom in mark, and it showed that they were playing the Falcons. Like 328 into the video is when he did it, which, yeah, it's perfect. He's been killing it. I'm sure he has a social media team that does all that stuff with him. But yeah, he does very well with the trolling on the internet. But so he is,
Yeah.
in terms of DFS, he's a fantastic play. I think that you're going to get so much touchdown equity from him. It's just kind of, picking and choosing which weapons you want to get. And usually the cheapest ones are usually where it's at. But he did get 32 DraftKings points at a $6,700 salary last week. I think that's fully in play again here. The one concern that I would have, but I'm not really as concerned, is if they get up to a huge lead and he doesn't have to do much in the second half, how much does that affect his fantasy point score? We saw that scenario last year when they played the Lions and put up like 40 points and a half, and he was just fine fantasy-wise. He smashed. So I think that Tom Brady's floor to ceiling combination is close to Murray from a PPD standpoint.
PPD, point per dollar. Yeah, yeah. I don't know why that sounded weird to me when you said that, but that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. I worry about the blowout. I'm curious. I'm about to go look it up to see how the Bucks did versus the Falcons last year, just because I don't know. I'm curious and I want to see. But like I think it's fine to play him. I mean, we saw the upside with him in week 1, right? On that Thursday night game. We saw that when the running game isn't working, Arians has no problem just saying, all right, Tom, go throw the ball as much as you can. And we know that AB's looking really good. I'm sure we'll talk about him a lot when we get to the wide receiver section. I think Godwin's looking good. Evans is going to look just fine. And, there's always Gronk there to troll you, Jared. So he has plenty of weapons to go with. And as we saw with Hurts, like this Atlanta Falcons defense is nothing to be scared of.
Yep, 100% agree. Let's see here. Let's look down the list. Guys that stick out to me here are Justin Herbert. I think Jalen Hurts is a fine play at 6,500. We touched on him yesterday. A guy that has immense rushing upside as well as a safe floor. I know he lost a fumble the other day, but I'm not concerned about that. I mean, he did struggle last year, the last half of the season with turnovers, but I think he's going to get that figured out this year. 35 passing attempts is a healthy number combined with the 7 rushes. I think we're going to see somewhere from in between like a 4 to 6 DraftKings point range for Hurts with the upside of 12 to 15 touches 12 to 15 rush attempts with the upside of that getting that 100-yard bonus on the ground as well as the 300-yard bonus through the air. So the upside for this guy is immense on DraftKings, more so than FanDuel, just because he does have the ability to get those point bonuses any given week. So I think he is in play against San Francisco as they're dealing with some injuries of their own.
Yeah, I just want to bring this up. Against the Falcons last year in December when these two teams faced off, Bucks won 31-27. Tom Brady threw for 390 with 2 touchdowns. What would that equal to? You're better at math than I am, Jared. What would that equal to in DK points?
You get the bonus, so you add an additional 3, and he already threw 2 touchdowns, so that's 11 without the yardage. It's probably close to like 27, 28 DraftKings points.
Okay, that's about right. That sounds right. But the more impressive thing is that Antonio Brown, 5 receptions, 93 yards, and a touchdown in that game. Mike Evans also went off there. So my boy AB's back in play, man.
He certainly is. We'll get to him because I know his price tag is probably too cheap in this spot. Yes, I love Gronk so much. Make sure you clip that one for later in the year. So moving down the list here, we have Stafford against Indy, Tannehill against Seattle, Cousins against Arizona. Jameis is there too. Baker Mayfield against Houston is interesting at 6K. I know that they're a run-first offense, and that's where we're going to focus with the running back talk. He did not really hit value at all. Did not throw a passing touchdown against the Chiefs, which actually kind of surprised me a little bit. So the only bailout that he got was that 300-point bonus that he did throw through the air. The pass attempts, I wish he had a little bit more than 28, but again, this team is going to be run first. You're kind of taking a gamble on Baker, and I think that people are going to view this spot on DraftKings and stack him with somebody if Odell continues to miss. I don't know if you're necessarily going to be able to get there. I think the plays here are with the running backs.
Yeah, I will say that Winston's price tag is interesting in this range. You have him at 6,200, no, 6,100, and he's QB 12 over here on DraftKings.
Yep.
Meanwhile, on FanDuel, he's QB 7. So
Right.
you are getting a discount over here on DraftKings. This is a guy who they relied on when it came to the end zone. I know he didn't have a lot of passing yards, and that is concerning because you're less likely to get that bonus. But even with this Panthers defense looking good against Wilson, I don't think they're a good defense quite yet. I need to see more of them. So I like Winston at this price tag. I think in GPPs, you can definitely do worse.
I like him too. I think that you can feel pretty comfortable in tournaments rocking the Winston Kamara stacks. I know that's, not very common necessarily in other situations, but with the amount of usage that Kamara is getting with this offense and the lack of their weapons, uh, you could find a way to make things happen in the receiving end of things. I know he only got 4 targets last week against Green Bay. I think a lot of that has to do with the blowout, but again, that receiving one of those receptions was a touchdown. So I understand where the concern would be with Camaro, but at the same time, I think that you can do that for the next probably 2 or 3 weeks as they figure this whole situation out. I know that they signed Kenny Stills this morning too, but I'm not concerned that that's going to affect Camara whatsoever. All right, looking down the list here, there are, I guess, a few more names to bring up. I think that you can bring up Joe Burrow's name against Chicago. He looked good, passed a lot. The volume, 27 attempts. It kind of seemed like he was passing more, honestly. He didn't pay off his price tag actually for week one. But Josh, I know maybe it's more so that Mixon's getting involved, but I do think that you can play Chicago or him against Chicago here.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm scared of Chicago defense like I used to be. That secondary doesn't seem like they were all that they were pent up to be. Maybe it was just Stafford and Sean McVay with his amazing offensive coaching skills. But I think that Burrow, we saw a good week one. I think I'm willing to take the risk on a week two, especially at this price tag. You get him at 5,800. This is a good price tag for him down here. So I can certainly get behind Burrow.
Yep, the final two guys that we'll talk about in this range at quarterback, and then we'll move on to running back, are Teddy Bridgewater against Jacksonville and Andy Dalton against the Cincinnati Bengals. I would have more to talk about in relation to Dalton if this game was in Cincinnati. His price tag is at 5,200. So if I'm taking one of the guys from this conversation, I'm definitely going Bridgewater. And now it makes it even more interesting that Jerry Jeudy is going to be missing. So the chances of you having a cheaper wide receiver like a KJ Hamler, who actually was reported today, Josh, that he's running with the ones in place of Jeudy. So KJ Hamler, we'll talk about him. I'm sure he's cheap. He's probably under 4K in the spot. So honestly, you could go and spend less than $10,000 with a QB option and possibly the best wide receiver on that team in this matchup against Jacksonville.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I think Desert Zombie brought up a great point in the chat here. Fields might vulture another touchdown from Andy Dalton. So how much can you trust in Andy Dalton, really? How much can you trust that Nagy, if Andy Dalton's struggling through halftime, he's going to say, all right, we're going a different direction. This is what the fans want anyway. They want to see Fields on the field. It might as well just sub you out here. So obviously Bridgewater has to deal with quarterback competition too. He's dealing with Drew Lock behind him, but I think he distanced himself from Drew Lock last week. Meanwhile, Andy Dalton didn't distance himself from Fields. He looked
Nope.
worse, and he ended up losing. Meanwhile, Bridgewater's team won. So I think Bridgewater has a little bit more of a leash compared to Andy Dalton. I think it's pretty simple. You go Bridgewater over Dalton at this range. There is the narrative with Dalton and everything. I understand it. I know there's a few people behind it. That person won't be me, though.
Yeah, so Teddy did show a little bit of floor from the ground, but that's not something I'm ever gonna bank in there. 19 rushing yards on 3 attempts. Those three are probably just scrambles. They're not designed runs, so I'm not really interested or not trying to bank on that. I do think that he's on the lower edge of cash game consideration just because of the streaming matchup against Jacksonville. He threw the ball 36 times, completion percentage 77.8%, very solid. He's not going to be a guy that gets a lot of 300-point bonuses, and he's not going to be a guy that necessarily goes off on the ground either. I think that his performance of 20 DraftKings points at 4,800 last week was good if you're looking for that in tournaments. But for me, the quarterback absolutely has to have 25 DraftKings points to win tournaments or even consider to win tournaments. I don't know how many times Bridgewater can do it this year, but this could be a week that he does.
Yep, for sure. I think our AP brought up a great point in the chat. Jared, you tried to skip over it. You're tired of me talking about him. I understand, man, but I'm going to keep talking about him. Jalen Hurts is the answer. Can't believe I'm such a Philly fan. Can't believe I'm touting Jalen Hurts against my own team, but my own team had a lot of struggles against rushing QBs. Kyler absolutely tore them apart last year, and we saw that any QB with mobility was able to tear them apart. Jalen Hurts, one of the more mobile QBs in the NFL right now. So I think Hurts at this price tag, it's even a discount compared to FanDuel. FanDuel has him as QB number 6. DraftKings has him as QB number 8. Also factors a little bit in there that they had Deshaun Watson ahead of him, but that's whatever. Watson isn't priced over on FanDuel. Regardless, though, Hurts is 100% in play at this price tag. I love this price tag. I'm going to keep touting this guy. I think he's the real deal. And I think that Hurts, Desert Zombie said it perfectly. Hurts and Devontae Smith will only get better together. This offense will only get better together. And this offensive line, they made a lot of mistakes in week 1. They had probably the most false starts that I've seen from a team in quite some time. I don't know if you watched that game, Jared, because I'm sure you were more focused on your players. But that game, there were so many false starts from that offensive line. And it's just about getting back into a rhythm, right? This is a team that was injured a lot through last season, especially that offensive line, and they're just getting used to Jalen Hurts being a QB. This offense, I think, will only get better, and if Jared Goff is able to torch my Niners, then I think almost any QB can.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, for me, Hurts is up there. I think he's my second favorite behind Kyler. You can argue that point per dollar, Jalen Hurts is a better play. I do think they have relatively the same rushing floor, but I will say that I do think that more often than not, the rushing touchdowns will go to Sanders more than they would to one of the Arizona running backs, and Kyler would rather take it himself. So in that regard, I think Kyler gets the slight edge there, but I love both of their rushing floors, and they both can secure point bonuses in both the rushing and passing departments. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really fun to watch again. You're going to get Jalen Hurts at a premier price tag, which I don't think he's under 6K more than this week. They probably just bump that up right away for next week.
Yeah, I think the fact that he is below, I mean, he's at 6.5 right now. The fact that he's below 6.5 just won't be much longer, man. I'm curious about what the Eagles matchups are for the next few games. If our AP can get that to me, that'd be awesome. But I can tell you guys, based off of that, I feel like still this is just a discount.
Yeah, I'll let him type it. I'm sure he's already working on it. The last thing I'll say is that in the range, like, he should not be priced lower than Herbert. Prescott, you can make a case for, but he has a tougher matchup than Hurts does. And then, you get into the Tom Brady's, Josh Allen's. I feel like he should be at 7K, so a $500 discount is something I would definitely take. He's going to be popular in tournaments. I think just from first look itself, he's probably the top 2 or 3 owned quarterback this week, but for good reason. I'm not going to say it's bad. Biggie, what's up? Rager says don't sleep on Rager. We'll talk a lot about these Philly pass options because I'm sure that they are cheap as well. Bodie, what's going on, everybody? What's going on, guys? All right, we'll move on. And if Kai wants to post the Eagles schedule in the chat, we can talk about that when we switch over and talk about Miles Sanders.
Yeah, he's already got it posted. Next 6 for this Eagles team: Niners, Cowboys, Chiefs, Panthers, Bucks, Raiders. I mean, just seeing how much Lamar ran all over the Raiders, I think that Raiders matchup will be good. I think, honestly, the only concerning matchup I see here is the Bucks one, but we even saw that the Bucks aren't too much to worry about with Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott and, Jalen Hurts, obviously different level, but I really like the matchups that he has.
Biggie, ready to start my DFS season. Gives 5 tier 1 subs and blows out Jared's left ear. What's up? What's up, Biggie? What's up, man? Bree812, 55 Jacks, KJ, Dre, and Cece's dad all gifted a sub. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, sir. Pleasure to have you in here. I know that you're a late night owl, so I appreciate you coming in and hanging out this afternoon. We are talking DraftKings, which is obviously your favorite site. So hopefully we can talk some week 1 or week 2 NFL DFS for you. I keep saying week 1. Maybe I just want that week to be over.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you keep saying it. It's like you want it to stick around. I don't know
Yeah.
what you're doing here, Jaron.
It's true. Let's move on here. Let's talk about these running backs. Christian McCaffrey, we saw the usage for him last week. Didn't even get in the end zone, but still smashed value on DraftKings. This is a guy that doesn't necessarily have to score touchdowns to hit value, but I think in tournaments you kind of want to, I think you would want a minimum of one. But if, let's say he scores one, he puts him at 34 DraftKings points on the day. So at this price tag, he's still too cheap. I think that Christian McCaffrey is going to end up being over 11K by week 6, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was actually a lot earlier. 21 rushing attempts, 9 targets, 30 total touches for McCaffrey. He's right back in play this week against New Orleans. I know that the matchup sucks. I know that they played them, the Packers didn't do anything against this defense. I'm not concerned though. I think that the usage in the negative game script that they're going to be in is going to be one that I'm going to be wanting to be a part of. Is he a cash game play? I think he is. I think he's a cash game player pool option. Can't necessarily say he's one of the best cash game options, but he certainly is in play for tournaments until we see that price tag go up probably 1,000 plus.
Yeah, 2 out of the last 4 games against this New Orleans defense, he's had 20 plus FanDuel points. So obviously that's FanDuel, not DraftKings. But I mean, I think he's just fine. We saw the usage there. We saw that he has a good connection with his new QB in Sam Darnold. And I think the fact that he has weapons around him is going to help him a ton. I mean, I know he's done well in years past, but like, he's never had this level of weapons, whether it be, the addition of Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, Dan Arnold. Ian Thomas didn't even look too bad on Sunday. So I just think there's a ton of things helping him out, and I think he'll be just fine against the Saints defense.
Biggie Delt gifting another tier 1 sub to Desert Zombie. Appreciate you, sir. Again, thanks, guys, for tuning in this afternoon. This is one of my favorite days of the week as well. So actually, every single day is. It's pretty nice. Anytime we can talk football. What's up?
Yes,
yep.
sir.
All right, let's go ahead. The one thing that I want to touch on, just because we're on this subject of running backs, he's not on the slate, Josh, but Saquon Barkley was limited today in practice. He actually was the league's worst graded running back for week 1, according to Pro Football Focus. So thoughts on that and thoughts on what that's going to happen on Thursday. We'll cover that for you guys in depth another day, but just want to get that since it just came through.
I would not be surprised at all if they sat him or just said, you know what, take this game off. I mean, I don't know. He didn't look good on Sunday. I think he is still really dealing with that injury. They're trying to find a way to get him back. And I would not be surprised to see him sit. Little Italy asked, do I hear that sound at all? No, I am very graced by being able to not hear the sound on the afternoon streams. I have to hear the sound on the morning streams though.
Yep.
So Jared and I get to switch.
Yes, sir. We get to switch off getting killed. All right. Let's talk about the running backs here. Below McCaffrey, you have Dalvin Cook against Arizona. Probably a popular bring back option in tournaments if you're stacking Kyler and D-Hop. Kamara against Carolina with the usage that he gets is certainly in play for GPPs. I wouldn't take a hard look at these opponent rankings except for McCaffrey's, which I know is accurate. Derrick Henry against Seattle. That's an interesting spot for a tournament bring back. We'll talk about Russ and his weapons here when we get to the wide receivers. Nick Chubb obviously stood out on FanDuel yesterday. He's the RB5 on DraftKings this week at 7,800. Normally, I don't like to target Chubb on DraftKings because he doesn't catch any balls. Last week, though, he did catch 2 on 2 targets. So, Josh, I feel like, is this a spot where we overreact on Chubb? He got 17 total touches, so it doesn't really fit my rule of trying to get in that 22 to 25 range. But his matchup is fantastic, and it looks like they actually are trying to give him some passing game work.
Yeah, they are trying to give him some passing game work, right? I think that the reason that you didn't see him do too well and you didn't see him get that amount of touches, one is that game script completely flipped in that game, right? You saw that the Chiefs kind of took over, and then the Browns had to focus on throwing the ball instead of running the ball with Chubb. Also, he lost that fumble, which was very
Yep.
costly to that team. It kind of seemed like they started to edge toward the Kareem Hunt side of things after he lost that fumble. Not to say that that's it's not good or bad, right? Like it's good in a sense and it's bad in a sense. It's good in a sense that maybe he would have got more carries if he didn't lose that fumble. It's bad in a sense that now we kind of know, and we've always kind of known that Kareem Hunt's right there behind him, and Stefanski's very willing to go to Hunt instead of Chubb if he sees that Chubb is faltering, just like in that game. So good and bad, I don't know. I think I'm just fine with playing him against Houston. I'm also fine with pivoting off of him in GPPs.
Yep. Yeah, I think that he's obviously a cash game option. Is he the best one? I don't know. Is his matchup the best? Probably. I like guys that can also catch the ball as well as get that PPR bonus racked up on DraftKings for pass catchers. Let's move on here. Let's go down the list a little bit. Austin Eckler sits at 7,300. Very good price tag for him. Jonathan Taylor gets the Rams defense. We saw him get the work, but the matchup is tough. I don't really know if I want to do that necessarily. Interesting GPP option, though. Joe Mixon against Chicago is in play. He got 30 touches last week as well. Miles Sanders going up against San Francisco. We can talk about Sanders and how he's finally back. I guess I think, I kind of wish that he got a few more rushing touches, but again, I'm not going to complain too much about it. He does have upside of 20 to 25 touches depending on the matchup. This one against San Fran is interesting. I wouldn't pair him with Hurts though, but give me your thoughts on Sanders.
Yeah, I don't know how willing I am going to be going to Sanders unless we see another injury in this Eagles backfield, specifically to Kenneth Gainwell. I mean, Gainwell took 35% of the snaps for this Philly team when it came to their backfield. And I think Gainwell looked really good on Sunday, too. I think this is someone that's going to be impressive. He's one of those Memphis backs coming out of college. We've seen these Memphis backs really do things when it comes to the NFL. For example, Antonio Gibson, a great example of that Memphis backfield really doing some stuff. And I think Gainwell has a lot of talent. So, like, I'm scared to go to Sanders just because I know Gainwell is going to get over 30% of those snaps at the running back position. And we even saw him going for a touchdown. We actually saw him going for 2 touchdowns. One got called back due to a holding call. So,
It did.
I mean, like, Gainwell just has insane upside, and I can't read it on your screen. But what is the price tag on him this week?
He is still 4,000
Yeah, I mean,
mid price.
that's a cheap price tag, man. I don't know. It's at least in consideration for GPPs, maybe because he is getting so many snaps right now, and I think that workload's only going to increase as the season goes on.
Yep. Brandon O Sports commented, Gainwell is the legit running back name. Couldn't have said it better myself. Desert Zombie. Gainwell looked really good in the preseason too. He certainly did. Kai wants us to touch on Mark Ingram. I promise we'll get there. I don't really have much nice to say about him though.
Yeah, you're gonna hear a couple of Mark Ingram haters here.
Moving down the list, started at Sanders. James Robinson, guys. I'm staying away until further notice. I wouldn't play him in this matchup anyway, but if the game is as bad as getting out touched by 30-year-old Carlos Hyde, it's a rough sledding for James Robinson owners this year, unless they're playing Houston again. But he had his best matchup of the season, only put up 8.4 DraftKings points. 5 rushing attempts is just pathetic, honestly. I know they were getting blown out, but you would have expected to see him possibly in some of those passing situations too. He's a complete stay away for me until we see more. Maybe we don't even see it. We would need an injury for that to happen. So unfortunately, I don't think that 2020 James Robinson's going to come out this year. Moving down the list, amazingly, Naji Harris is priced below James Robinson at 6,300. I think that a classic overreaction spot would be to fade Naji against Las Vegas. We saw what the Ravens were able to do on the ground last night, and they're coming off a short week now. They have one less day to prepare, and then they have to go across the country to play in Pittsburgh. So I am on Naji Harris this week. I think he's a fine option for tournaments, and he could be a guy that I could get behind in cash to a certain extent.
All aboard the Najee train, man. I mean, I think that people are going to overreact, like you said, to the fact that he had a bad week one. But we got to remember, this guy's a rookie. And more importantly, he's a human being. You got to imagine nerves got to him. You got to imagine getting used to the being in the NFL and getting tackled by these big boys is a little bit rough as well. But as you see him acclimate to the game, you're going to see him show those skills that he has, those skills that he showed us in Bama, those pass catching skills that he improved on in the offseason. He's going to show it all to us. And
Right.
I think this is kind of a prime spot against Vegas. This is also a spot against Vegas where we saw the Ravens tear up that defense last night. I know it didn't work out for the Ravens, but we saw them get a lot done on the ground, whether it be from the QB or we saw certain carries from Tyson Williams and from I'm forgetting the name, Latavius Murray as well.
Yep.
So I think that if Najee Harris is going to continue to get all the snaps for the running back position, you have to treat him like a guy who has to be in play every week until the price tag is appropriate.
Agreed. 16 rushing attempts for Najee Harris, 3 targets out of the backfield. That's a little bit lower than what I would have had him at. Only 1 reception for 4 yards. So I think that is a little bit on the low side. 17 total touches, I think, is on the lower range of his floor. Now we have to see more. But again, this is a fantastic week to not overreact and hammer the usage of Najee Harris at this price tag. Moving forward, Ezekiel Elliott is at 6,200 against the Chargers. For me, he's going to be in play in tournaments just for price alone. And I think that, what we saw last week against Tampa is just not going to be something that we see often. Never really roster running backs against Tampa anyway. David Montgomery saw a lot of work on the ground as this team's RB1. I don't want to overreact here, but I like Montgomery. I liked him a lot the last half of the season last year when he was absolutely crushing it. That was a lot of schedule. They had a very, very weak schedule to end the year last year. But we saw this again. I mean, he put up a very good performance against a very tough defense against the Rams. 17 touches, is that good enough for David Montgomery in this spot? And could you see him run more?
I think so. I think that's the big thing is that I expect him to run more because that wasn't a positive game script for him. Now, I'm not sure if this game against Cincy will necessarily be a positive game script. And we did see Cincy kind of stop Cook to a certain regard. I think that was more towards the fact that the Vikings weren't able to move the ball. I think that Montgomery will help this Chicago team move the ball. I think the O-line for Chicago is at least a little bit better. So I like David Montgomery here. I think you can expect 20 touches from him. And I like the price tag on him. I mean, this is a guy where we saw that true upside last year of what he can do, and I think you could see it again in this matchup. OG Nick, Fish43, thanks for hanging out with us, man. Have yet to see you in the chat so far, but happy you're here with us today. He said, you guys said he looks scared of getting hit in referring to Najee Harris. Shouldn't the eye test trump potential till proven otherwise? Jared, what do you think? Najee Harris, eye test, potential, which side do you lean with?
Yeah, I think I lean with the usage right now. I think that as he grows and as he gets more comfortable with the speed of the game, I think that they are going to put him in that workhorse role. We already saw, I mean, he was the guy, right? So that was also a weird script against Buffalo for a lot of it. They were down early as well, and they still gave him as many touches as he got. So I'm so high on the Najee Harris train, but I understand the concerns of the eye test for sure.
Yeah, I side with potential. I know it's crazy to say. We usually trust our eye test, but I side with potential. Sooner or later, I believe in this guy to figure it out because I know how talented he actually is. And I know how much this team wants to rely on him. I think your take wasn't wrong, Jared, that you had last week in saying that, ownership kind of forced the Steelers' hand to take Najee Harris, saying that they needed that true running back. They needed their new Le'Veon Bell. That's what they want this guy to be. So, I mean, the expectations are high. The expectations were high for him at Bama too. I think that he'll prove them right, and I think he will improve throughout the season.
Okay, skipping down here. Saw Josh Jacobs have a night last night. You're not taking him against Pittsburgh this week. Myles Gaskin against Buffalo. No, thank you. Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams both get very good price tags against the Jacksonville defense. They both saw very, very similar work. What are we doing with these Denver running backs, and which one do you want to consider? Because it's kind of a mess still.
Yeah, it's still definitely a mess, and I will kind of opt out, take the wussy route a little bit, and say neither until proven otherwise. I don't think I'm going to either one of these guys. They split touches basically dead down the middle, so you really can't find an advantage with either one. I'm probably just gonna stay away. I don't know. I think there's just better spots on the slate. You don't need to fish for value here. There's a guy that we're about to talk about who's the best value play on the whole entire slate for at the running back position.
Yeah, the one thing I will say, and make sure people don't overreact to, I was surprised at the 14 attempts for Javonte. Not so surprised that he put up the fancy points that he did with those touches. So that's interesting. I also want to note that people will overreact to this Melvin Gordon game log, and he will garner more ownership than he should this week, probably. He got 70, he had that 70-yard rush that resulted in that score as well. So 11 rushing attempts for Gordon. When's the last time that he averaged 9.2 yards per carry in this league? Probably 3 years ago. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
at this point, and the receptions aren't really there. I don't think that the Broncos are necessarily using the running backs as pass catching options. So for me, it could be a stay away for me too. I think that it's hard to ignore the workload, but again, he only got 11 touches, so I don't know. I'm probably staying away at this moment from a first look perspective. Moving down the list, you alluded to it. There is a guy that is going to be one of the most popular plays on the slate. Let's talk about him and why he's in such a good spot.
Yeah, the guy that I am talking about is Elijah Mitchell at 5K. He got 19 of the 20 running back touches or carries when it came to after Raheem Mostert got injured last week. Of course, you're going to see this team activate Trey Sermon this week, so I think it could be a little bit different. But all you got to listen to, or all you got to know about these San Fran running backs is just listen to Kyle Shanahan. Listen to how he talks about these guys. Listen to how he said, we're going to suit up the best three guys for the role, and we're going to go from there. And that's why Elijah Mitchell started over Trey Sermon last week, is because he believed that Elijah Mitchell was the guy for the role. So Shanahan obviously believes in this guy. You got to remember, he has an amazing speed. I think he ran like a 4.4 40 this at the combine. He also has the best burst out of any running back in the NFL draft, according to his combine too. Like, Elijah Mitchell is an animal, man. This is someone that you cannot underestimate. The 49ers saw him drop to them, and they were like, they already had taken a running back in Trey Sermon in the third round. They're like, yeah, we've got to select this guy. He's too good to let up here. Instead of going with the defensive position where they could have used depth in the secondary, instead of going to maybe a wide receiver where they've had so many problems over the past few seasons, they elected to go with this guy because they believe that he's fallen too deep on the draft board. So they obviously believe in him a lot, and I just don't understand how you can't be salivating at this 5K price tag.
Yeah, agreed. I think he comes in as one of the best point per dollar plays at the position. The receiving numbers definitely scare me a little bit, but I think that the amount of work that he should get, I think we can expect 18 to 22 touches for Eli Mitchell at this price, and for that, it's just way too cheap. I know that they probably didn't raise his price enough. Where would you price him if you knew the information that we know now?
I think I'd price him around 6K, probably 6.2 is where I think it would be right on the money for Elijah Mitchell, knowing that his role is going to be 15 plus touches with this San Fran offense. I will say the concerning things are there's always red flags on value plays like this. So I'll just be completely honest with you guys and tell you exactly what they are. Hasty is going to take those receptions. Hasty seems like he's going to be the third down back and the guy who's going to get the passing work. And who knows what the hell happens with Trey Sermon? I mean, he is going to be active this week. And, Trey Sermon could end up taking some of those touches if Elijah Mitchell gets cold. We saw it a lot of the time last year. If Kyle Shanahan thinks that one of his running backs has the hot hand over the other guy, the guy with the hot hand is the one who's featured in that run system. It's why we try to pinpoint this 49ers running back situation every week that they're on the main slate. It's because if you find that right running back, they usually have the hot hand and they're usually going absolutely bonkers with this run scheme.
Yeah, it's the one hesitancy that I have is that do we see Hasty? Do we see some Trey? I don't know. I mean, I think we do. So with that, I think that we can expect 15 plus touches for Eli. I'm just a little bit concerned that, it's the running back carousel, right? It always is. And leaning on that one guy and taking stabs at him is going to be, important this week. Um,
For sure.
we'll get to Brandon Ayuk Desert as we go over and switch over to running back here. Any other targets for these cheap running backs this week?
Yeah, I will say Hasty's at 4K. It's at least someone who's going to be in consideration for me. I think another guy who is interesting is Naeem Hines. We saw him at the end of the day get a total of 15 touches. 6 of those touches were receptions. He had 8 targets as well and did well in the passing work. Alongside with those 9 carries, like he's a guy who is getting a good chunk of touches and looking good for this 4.7 price tag. So I know it's a really tough matchup against the Rams, but it's a really tough matchup against the Rams where I would expect that front 7 to absolutely stifle that Jonathan Taylor running game, and they might end up going to the pass catching situation and where Hines would be featured. So I like Hines. I think that, there's a reason they made this guy a top 10 paid running back. It's because he's talented, they believe in him, and they want to get him on the field.
Yeah, he is also a PPR monster, and his price tag went down this week by $300. I think you can roster him in tournaments and feel pretty good about it. He could be a run back for those Rams receiver stacks. Anyway, let's talk. The last person that I want to discuss before we move on to wide receiver is Ronald Jones. I know that we kind of saw that, obviously he was in the doghouse with Arians because he fumbled last week. That it was a thing that happens. It's not the first time. It's probably the third time that's happened over the course of the last 2 seasons. I think that for him, he's $4,800, so his price tag went down. He gets a very, very good matchup against Atlanta. Tampa Bay's team total, I would have to guess, is around 30.5 points. And finally, we got the news today that he's going to be active and starting in this spot. That was made clear by The Athletic as well as Arians himself. So he's come out and said he's out of the doghouse, but obviously he could easily go back in if he were to make some mistakes like he did last week.
It's the same thing as the situation that we have with the 49ers backs, right? Like this guy could end up in the doghouse, and if he does, then you're kind of screwed when it comes to DFS terms. So it's just knowing the risk that you have when taking these guys.
100% agree. All right, I think that's all I have until more value opens up. But right now, let's switch over and talk about wide receiver. At the top, we have D-Hop at 8K. We have Stephon Diggs at 77. And then Metcalf and Ridley as fine bring-back options or stack options. We also have some of the Minnesota wide receivers in this range as well. So, yeah, I guess for me, I'm prioritizing these Seattle receivers in tournaments over Minnesota. How do you view this top, let's say, 7,000 to 8,000 range?
Yeah, I know you're going to shake your head at me again because you did yesterday and you kind of got on me about it, but I think it's crazy not to at least consider Calvin Ridley in this range at 7,500. I like the bring back if you are stacking Tampa Bay. This is a guy who the last 3 times he's faced off against the Buccaneers, he's had 12 plus targets. He's had 2 receiving touchdowns. He even had a monster game where he had 163 yards. And those were games where he needed to compete with Julio Jones. Now he has it all by himself. And I think that's to his benefit. And like we talked about when we reviewed the Thursday night game, that Tampa Bay secondary is banged up. So, I think Ridley has an advantage here. I think everyone's going to overreact to his week 1 performance and say, wow, maybe this isn't the guy we all thought he can be. But I think he is that guy. I think he is going to be the main guy for Atlanta. I think you could see him put up a monstrous game against Tampa Bay.
Yeah, for me, there's 2 things, and I think I'm overreacting to the first one. I hope that there are more targets there. They abandoned it completely after the second quarter. He had 3 targets on the first drive, and then another couple targets after that, and then he completely fell off until very, very late in the fourth quarter. So it depends what version of Matt Ryan we get. It depends what version of this offense that we get, and hopefully he can get there without his team having to score a lot of points, because I don't think they're going to in this spot necessarily. Now, I do agree with you that the secondary for Tampa's beat up. I also agree that he's a fantastic run back option. He's probably the only run back option I would feel comfortable with in terms of playing him with a Tom Brady and one of his receiver stacks. So I like Calvin Ridley. I think the price is too cheap, especially for a guy that should have the target share that he is expected to have this year. We just didn't see it in week 1.
For sure.
Okay, again, for me, I think that Metcalf and Lockett both, I know that they're now obviously the top in the top 10 in regards to pricing, where we got a little bit of a discount on them in week 1, but I think that they're fantastic stack options. I'm not going to take a guess on who it's going to be, and I think that the correct approach last week and this week is to just double stack them with Russ, because I know it's expensive, but I think there's a way to definitely do it this week. Thoughts on the Lockett Metcalf situation?
Yeah, I think that the double stack definitely makes sense this week, right? It's perfectly fine to bring up that double stack again and feel good about it. I think both of these guys are in good positions against this Tennessee team. I don't know. I just think that the stack, it's probably going to be popular in GPPs this week, but it's definitely worth considering.
Right. Okay, moving down the list here. Before we do that, I'm going to just recap and say I think I like the Seattle wide receivers better than I like the Minnesota ones. I do think Minnesota's in a good spot, and I think it was more so Arizona's defense was very good, but I also think that Tennessee imploded when their game plan didn't go according to plan. So I would slightly rank the Seattle wide receivers against Minnesota at a first look glance. Keenan Allen also in play at 7K against Dallas. One of the guys that's going to fall under the radar this week. Obviously, tough matchup last week. Gets a very, very easy matchup this week. 13 targets. He is another PPR monster. He also got the 100-yard receiving bonus. He's going to get that more often than not, as he is a chains guy. He's not necessarily a deep option. Obviously, we saw the A-Dot. His longest attempt, or his longest catch yesterday, was 17 yards. So Keenan Allen is going to be in a better spot here against Dallas. And if you told me that he already got 22 DraftKings points against Washington, there's no reason to not fire him up again.
Yep, I agree in firing him up again. I think it's definitely reasonable to think that you can go back to the well here.
Okay, moving down the list, we do have A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, who both took huge price dips against Seattle. Probably popular wide receiver options for bringbacks. We also have Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb in this range as well, going up against the Chargers without Michael Gallup, so I expect both of them to see their target shares increase. And then finally, we have Chris Godwin and Debo Samuel, who was the tournament play that you needed to have last week to win the millionaire. So talking about Debo, talking about Godwin, talking about any of these guys in this 6K price range that stick out to you.
Yeah, I want to look at it really closely. I don't know. I like Godwin, but I think I like Antonio Brown more. I like Debo. I think he's an okay play, but I just hate targeting receivers from San Fran. I do really like Amari Cooper. I think Cooper can get the job done. We didn't see much work from Washington when they faced off against the Chargers, but I think that was more about quarterback play than anything from Ryan Fitzpatrick. When we saw Heineke come into the game, we saw that, even though it was a really impressive catch, we still saw that Terry McLaurin was able to get some love. So I think Cooper could definitely be in play here. I think we're on the verge of seeing Cooper kind of break out. And I mean, it's crazy to say, but like Cooper could have a similar breakout season to what we saw Devontae Adams do last year. And if that's the case, then you'll never see him at 6,800 again. This is a ridiculously cheap price tag. So you have to consider him here. I think after this week, you're going to see him above 7.5. I would be surprised if he wasn't above 7.5 next week.
Yeah, I would be too, especially with we don't know how long. I mean, Gallup's going to be out in multiple weeks, so we'll see how that goes. Let's see. Down the list, speaking of Coopers, we have to talk about the other Cooper in Cooper Kupp. 6K against Indianapolis in this spot. I think that obviously he secured that long touchdown last week on Sunday night. But I think he's quickly turning into Matt Stafford's favorite target. We also did see Matt Stafford do very well with distributing the football to this team. And obviously having this guy with the ability to get 10 plus targets, get that 100-yard bonus, and get the touchdown equity that he has at this price tag is just too good to pass up on. I think you can make the case that you can roster both Antonio Brown and Cooper Kupp and feel very, very good about it without breaking the bank. at these 6K price tags. So which one is your favorite here, or do you think that you would just take both?
Damn, you took the words right out of my mouth, Jared. I was about to ask you who you would go with if you had to take the option. I feel a little biased. I like both of these guys. I do really like AB and like what I've seen from him. There was 2 games that he had monster performances last year against Tampa, or I guess 2 games in the recent years where he's had monster performances against Tampa. One, like I said, 5 receptions, 94 yards, and a touchdown. Then he had another one where he had 10 plus receptions, 150 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So, like, I think that AB is almost a lock and load in my opinion. I really don't see how I fade this guy on 4 p.m. only, where I specialize in those specialty slates. So, like, it feels like a must play. I'm sure he's going to be popular. That's just fine by me. I'm going to find a way to jam him in the lineup. But I think Cup is a lock on 1 p.m. only. Luckily, I get to have both of them and call it a day.
Yep. So I clicked around, and obviously, I think that this game stack of Tom Brady, Antonio Brown, and Calvin Ridley is certainly one that's going to garner some ownership this week. Although I do think that it's the best 3 ways to go. You would have $4,933 per player remaining, so it's not the cheapest stack in the world, but it's definitely one where I feel like if you were to target the other wide receivers in Tampa, you'd probably just, I'd feel much better taking AB. So I like the price tags of Cup and Brown a lot at 6K on DraftKings. It feels more so like a week where we won't be dumpster diving like we were earlier in week 1. Let's move down the list here. I know that we have a note about DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, so let's just start right there against the Saints. They're both under 6K, and if you include Terrace Marshall, all 3 of those guys are under 6K. So what are we doing with the Carolina receivers, and what news do we have on them?
Yeah, the big news that we do have is from Ian Rappaport, who tweeted this out earlier this morning, saying that Saints Pro Bowl cornerback Marshawn Lattimore is having surgery today to repair a chipped bone in his thumb, sources say, and the injury he suffered on Sunday making him week to week. Lattimore agreed to a 5-year, nearly $100 million deal before the game. That blows my mind when you see these players agree to these deals right before their game. It's like they knew something was going to happen. Right before the game they get injured, they always agree to that deal. Anyway, that's besides the point. It does weaken the secondary, right? A secondary that was already having a little bit of a problem. We thought they would have a problem. They didn't necessarily have a problem against the Saints, but we don't think that they're going to be all they're hyped up to be. So it at least brings these guys into play. I'm not sure how much I like them. I think when it comes to pass catchers on this Carolina team, most times I'm just going to side with, hey, I'd rather take CMC and call it a day. But I don't know. Can you get behind Moore or Robbie Anderson this week?
I cannot get behind Anderson as much because I know that he had that 57-yard touchdown, and that was the thing that got him close to value. But he got 3 targets and only 1 interception. Now, this is probably a tad bit of an overreaction. Maybe it's on the lower end of his floor in regards to targets. But until we see more, I mean, I think that Sam Darnold was definitely prioritizing DJ Moore and CMC. So I feel like I'm probably going to fade this receiver core and just take Christian McCaffrey on DraftKings.
Yep, for sure. We're going to keep going down the list. Anyone else you want to talk about here?
Yeah, I think that we can move on, but the one place I want to stop before we do that are these Denver receivers, because we do need to bring that up now with Judy being out next week. We have Cortland Sutton, who, I think he's a little, he's getting eased back into football, played his first game in over a year. 3 targets, 1 reception, only for 14 yards. So definitely not the output that I would have liked to have seen. So I don't know. I'm a little bit hesitant in going him. Now, when we talk about the other guys that should step up, we have options for improvement from Tim Patrick, more snaps for KJ Hamler. Maybe one of these guys comes in. I know that Deshaun Hamilton is out. So, I mean, their wide receiver room is thinning by the moment, and we'll touch on Fant here in a little bit. But is there any interest for you in a guy like Tim Patrick who will always get overlooked, or maybe even a KJ Hamler?
Yeah, I'm interested in KJ Hamler just because he is getting those starter reps like we heard about earlier today. So Hamler does make sense. But I think, honestly, when you get the cheap wide receivers, there's a few guys that jump off the page. DraftKings was kind of forced to make this contest before the Monday Night Football game, and because of that, you get a cheap price tag in Bryan Edwards, who's at 3,700. I think. Hold on, let me find. Yeah, 3,700 for Bryan Edwards. I mean, I know it's a tough matchup against Pittsburgh, but we saw Carr relying on him in the last quarter, I feel like you see that maybe a little bit more, especially if it turns out that Ruggs is still going to be banged up. Also, Renfro, 3,600, had 9 targets last night. I mean, how can you not consider some of these Raiders wide receivers at the bottom tier here?
Yeah, I think that they're in play. I know that people will be scared to target them against Pittsburgh and probably click Darren Waller's name more, and I agree with them. But at the same time, this could be a very, very interesting way to go. Not sure if it's cash necessarily, but in tournaments, yeah, I mean, fire these guys up. I think that eventually Ruggs is going to have himself a day as well, but Renfro, 9 targets, stands out like a sore thumb. Edwards, on the other hand, got a lot of his action. I think at least 4 targets were from the fourth quarter. I know that one of those targets was in the first half, and that was incomplete. So 4 straight receptions for him in the fourth quarter is something that, I get a little bit worried about that. But Renfro, I'm totally on board with.
Yep, for sure. I don't know. Did we touch on the Ayuk thing yet? I know we
No, we
said
have
we were
not.
going to. All right, so let's touch on that really quickly before we do move on to tight end. Obviously, got a lot less snaps this past Sunday against the Lions. It came out later on in the post game press conference from Shanahan that Ayuk fell in the depth chart. That fall in the depth chart was injury related due to him dealing with a hamstring problem for a lot of camp. He also said Sherfield outdid him in camp, but it makes sense that he outdid him because, well, Ayuk was injured. So
Yep.
how are we reacting to this? Are we overreacting? Are we underreacting? I've even seen, like, at least from the fantasy football season long perspective, that a lot of people are trying to trade Ayuk now, and I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts for this week at least.
Yeah, for this week, I'm not going to overreact. I think Ayuk is fine. I'm hesitant in playing him in DFS until he's more healthy. That's always been the concern with him. Honestly, it's always been the concern with this wide receiver room in general. The one thing I will say people are going to overreact to is Debo Samuel at 6,700. Obviously, he broke the slate last week, and he was a piece you needed to win tournaments. I think a lot of that had to do with that 79-yard long touchdown that he had. But at the end of the day, I mean, he did have 12 targets. So he's a guy we can keep an eye on. But again, I think that the price hike after that big game forces me off of him a little bit, especially with the guys that we already like at 6K. The other guys in the room, though, Sherfield, I think just Sherfield. I don't think I can even trust Sanu or bring him up in this topic of conversation. But Sherfield, with the injuries to Hurd, Fowler, and James already, should step up big time this season, and he is 3,200 in this spot. So if you want to run somebody back, if you're playing Hurts and Devontae Smith or even Hurts naked, I don't think that Sherfield's the worst idea.
Yep, I can certainly get behind it. All right, anything else in the wide receiver range? If not, let's keep it going and move on to tight end.
No,
Wait, hold on. Before we move on, I saw this comment from Chris the Fed, and I'm sure you just did too.
Yeah.
Ayuk equals just yuck. Yeah.
Yep, pretty much.
You're hurting my soul, man. I don't like to talk dirty about my Niners. I almost wore my Niners hat today, and I'm happy I didn't because all this disgracing on my Niners would have made me sick.
Okay, let's move on here and talk about the tight ends for DraftKings Week 2. Again, if you guys are enjoying this video, it's also going to be up later tomorrow morning on YouTube. So make sure that you click and like and subscribe this video if you are listening back to it later in the week. Darren Waller sitting at 7,600, obviously crushed last night. 19 targets. Josh, I think he had 1 reception in his first 7 targets. So as soon as Derek Carr gets on the same page with Waller, this could be a matchup nightmare for teams. I think that he's definitely in play against Pittsburgh. Probably viable at 7,600. I think that people might shy away from him just because, again, I don't know if we can necessarily bank on this number, 19. But at the same time, he has the ability to break the slate whenever he touches the field.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you had to pay a pretty penny. This is starting to get into Travis Kelce territory where you're
Yep.
going to see him as one of the highest priced tight ends every single week. But it's justified, right? Especially with that workload that he's getting in Vegas with Carr. I like it. I don't think it's a bad play. I'm not going to say it's a great play either. I think there's one tight end that I've kind of keyed in on that I really do like this week, though.
Yeah, speaking of Darren Waller, we are going to be giving away one free week of NFL All Access content to somebody who does not have a NFL membership so far this season. So make sure, you guys, to tune in to the end of the stream and stay on so that you can be eligible to win. That has all. You can thank Darren Waller for that prize today. Let's move down the list here. George Kittle at 6,400 against Philly. Could be an interesting bring back for those Philly stacks. Kyle Pitts, 5,200 against Tampa. If I'm going anybody for Atlanta, it's going to be Calvin Ridley. I'm skipping over Gronk. I think that Goddard is in play. Down the list here, I mean, it's kind of gross. Like, we can touch on Noah Fant at 42. I think he makes sense in that offense, especially with Judy not playing. So I think he makes an interesting cash game play. Let me hear who's the guy that you're targeting down at the cheap end here.
You just said him. Noah Fant,
Okay.
4,200. 8 targets last week is enough to get the job done for me.
Yeah.
Had 6 receptions. Without Jerry Jeudy, you're going to see him targeted more. And this is a great environment to get targeted in. It's against Jacksonville. So, like, this defense we saw last week, if the Texans can score against them, who knows how much the Denver Broncos can put up. Maybe it's a little bit of an overreaction to that defense being bad, but I certainly think they're going to be on the bottom end of defenses this season. So, sign me up. Noah Fant's at too cheap of a price tag, and I'm calling it now. He's going to hit value in a little bit more.
Yeah, I can definitely get behind that. I think that's the main guy that I'm looking at right now for cash games, especially given the fact that I know that Judy got hurt in the middle of that game. But normally I would say we should expect anywhere from 5 to 7 targets for Noah. Now we're bumping that up into the range of 8 to 10 and possibly more given what game script that they're in. Is it better to pay down at tight end this weekend in GPPs, says KB Pitt. Well, for me, if I'm paying up, it's Waller, and then I think I'm kind of advancing into the 4K range. So that's kind of how I would approach that. For GPPs, you're not going to get much leverage in regards to ownership percentage with Waller because people are thinking the same thing, right? Like, you're going to get a guy that probably has more of a target share than anybody on the slate in regards to pass catchers. So the fact that he did what he did and recency bias, I don't think people care about the matchup. They're just going to go for the volume here. And I would expect Waller to garner anywhere from 30 to 40, well, not 40, maybe 25 to 30% ownership in tournaments, which is honestly too high. I think that might be a fade point.
Yep, definitely.
All right, let's go down the list. I'm trying to find something here, but I'm sure we can poke holes in a lot of these guys. I think Austin Hooper makes for an interesting play if OBJ sits again. Jared Cook is gross, but against Dallas, I think he's in play.
You say he's gross, man. How many? I saw this yesterday when I was scrolling through regular or fantasy football. He got 8 targets in week 1, and that was against the Washington defense. Yeah, it was surprising to me too. But like, he didn't end up getting all of the snaps. We saw Parham got some snaps. We saw another tight end for the Chargers got some snaps too. But neither one of them got targeted. It was only Cook. So I think Cook could be the guy who gets a decent amount of targets as long as Herbert's throwing the ball a lot. I mean, he threw it 47 times this past week. So if we see something like that again, then I think Cook at what's the price tag here?
3,039.
39. Like, it's dirt cheap, man. I can certainly get behind it.
Yeah. I mean, I can too. It's normally we aren't touting Jared Cook just because he doesn't offer much, but if he's getting that amount of targets in the absence of that Hunter Henry less offense now, maybe he steps into that role.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to pose another question here. And sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. No. But when it comes to these lower end tight ends, we know that Gallup is going to be missing for the Cowboys. Can you get behind a Schultz or a Jarwin possibly? Schultz is at 3.3, Jarwin's at 3.1. I think there are worse options on the slate, especially considering that Schultz got 6 targets last game. Jarwin only got 4, but, again, these are extremely cheap tight ends, and if you're looking for those value plays at tight end, I don't mind it.
Yeah, give me Schultz for the time being if I had to choose one. I don't know if Blake Jarwin's all the way back yet. I know that there were reports that he was a little bit slow in camp, and he's obviously going to be on a timeshare. I would think that they would give Schultz a little bit more work through the first 6 weeks of the season until they're ready to go again. This is going to be an 18-week season, so it'll be interesting to see how they approach that from a timeshare standpoint. And now Dalton Schultz was definitely more efficient on his targets. He caught all 6 balls as well for 45 yards. Now, I don't think either of these guys are going to be guys that, like, I know we predicted like a Blake Jarwin breakout last season. A lot of the fantasy community did, but I don't think either of these guys are going to be anywhere close to that 10 target range or even crack 100 yards on a game. Maybe they'll do it once, but that's on the higher end of their range there. So for me, I think it's interesting. I think you can. I would be choosing Dalton Schultz though, for sure. Moving down the list, I don't love what I see in a lot of this. Maybe we can touch on Pharaoh Brown. I know that's gross, but he did get 5 targets at 2,900 and gets Cleveland this week. I don't think there's a reason to go any lower than Fant, honestly, in cash, and I don't know if you would really want to go any lower than that in tournaments. Any love for any of these guys? We saw Alberto also hit that 10 DraftKings point mark. James O'Shaughnessy seems to be that security blanket for Trevor Lawrence. I mean, all these guys are pretty gross, but anything that you see here?
Yeah, don't go to Alberto. I know he hit that 10 mark, but he really got lucky with that touchdown. So don't
Yeah.
fall victim to that trap. Same thing with O'Shaughnessy. I wouldn't fall victim to him either. I don't know. I think you probably cut it off at, I don't know, what would you say? I think for me, I'd probably cut it off at Schultz in all honesty.
Yep. And then, so I know we talked about this play yesterday on FanDuel, but Johann Johnson is still wide receiver eligible on
Oh.
DraftKings at 3,600. Definitely could be a guy we look at. Obviously, the targets of only 3 weren't spectacular. I think that he was on the variance for this play was through the roof in a positive way. So he could come back to earth a little bit, but I'm interested in seeing this for a tournament type of approach.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a good tournament type of approach. I think he does come back down to earth, but it's at least something that you have to consider.
Agreed. All right, let's move on here and let's talk about defense. And we will start at the top with the Los Angeles Rams, the Bucks at 41, Broncos at 38, Patriots at 37, Niners 36, Browns 35. Now, I think that out of any of these teams, I would consider the Bucks and the Browns as prime GPP options. I never want to spend more than $3,000 on a defense, so paying up for any of these is not something that I'm really interested in doing. Moving down the list, though, um, yeah, see, I'm not in love with much on the defense from a first look standpoint. Anything jump out to you here?
Um, Honestly, I know it sounds really ugly, but Jets at 2.2 kind of feel like a pay down option to me. They'll be at home this week. They get to face off against a New England team that isn't going to be very pace heavy. It's going to be a low scoring one. And we saw these running backs are fumble. They like to fumble the ball a lot. We saw Ramondre Stevenson fumble. We saw Naeem Harris
Yeah,
fumble. We saw they have a little bit of a problem with their gas tank. So I think that the Jets could potentially be in play, not to be a great scoring defense, but to give you positive points, which is really all you need at 2,200.
agreed. Yeah, I mean that's my whole strategy is always paying down at defense. Brian did ask. I think we just answered your question, dude. Two and a half. He wanted a defense under 2.5K. Jets would definitely qualify for that. They're honest. On paper, it looks like one of the more like acceptable answers for pay down options for me. So right now, we'll just stick with that, and I think the Jets are a prime option at 2,200. That's the first look here. Josh, do we want to very very quickly build like a starter stack for the crowd here?
Yeah, man, I'm totally down. Let's do it.
Okay. Well, I would like to start this thing out right away, and let's go with I want some actually have an option to bring somebody back on it. So let's start with this. Hmm, I felt confident, and now I don't as much anymore. Um,
Well, while you're deciding, let me just say really quickly, make sure to go qualify for that giveaway of the FanDuel voucher. Make sure to go shout us out on Twitter. Make sure to add Jared and I that way so I am able to see the shout out and you will have a chance at that FanDuel voucher. Last time I checked, which is about 15 minutes ago, I think we had like 8 people that did it. So you have a 1 out of 8 chance right now if you have submitted your entry, and I'm sure a few more people will get in there. So make sure to go get your tweet in there.
okay. So, with this being said, I know that we went Tom Brady earlier, so I'm not going to do that this time around. I think an interesting way to go, Josh, would actually be going with a weird tournament stack with Dak Prescott.
Ooh, I like it. I think that's juicy. Okay, let's lock in Dak and let's get one of my favorite wide receivers on the board this week. Let's get Amari Cooper.
Okay. Now,
Wow,
in
they
this
match
game,
salaries. That's crazy.
it is crazy. We're going to stick in that same. Actually, I'm going to go one step further and make things a little different. We didn't touch on this dude very much, but I know. So, obviously, my first option would be going Keenan Allen in this spot, but at the same time, I think that you can make a case for Mike Williams. I know that I mean, he did have a very, very solid game, 8 for 12 in regards to the targets that he got for 82 yards and a touchdown. He does have big play upside, so we didn't really see that much in the first game here against Washington. But the fact that he got 12 targets in this game against that defense was very impressive. So I think Mike Williams is just a cheaper version of a bring back player for this Chargers team.
Yeah, we talked about it and said that, there was plenty of talks at a camp saying that they might use him almost similar to how they use Mike Thomas over in New Orleans, and they lived up to their word. He didn't have any of those deep plays, but he still had a huge workload this past week. All right, we have Cooper, we have Williams, we have Dak. Let's get one last piece of this. Let's fill in a cheap tight end to go Schultz.
All right, cool. So the whole idea behind this, guys, is we're gonna give you a little bit of a blueprint here, and we'll have you guys fill out the last 3 spots. So Josh, we actually only have 2 more slots to go. We obviously should leave the flex and the DST open, so that leaves us with 2 running back slots and a wide receiver slot. I would like to correlate one more time with one guy on each side of the game on whatever game we choose. So I'm going to look at that really quick. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but I would kind of prefer it. So I'm going to go ahead and pick on Devontae Smith.
Nice. Get Devontae Smith in there. And then I feel like the easy way to do things, go to running back, put Elijah Mitchell in. I know I brought up the red flags about Eli Mitchell, but I still think he'll, at the end of the day, be just fine.
Okay, and now we have 5,500 remaining for running back, flex, DST. If you punt at running back, that gives you a little bit more work to figure out. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play a guy. This is gonna be a little bit different. I'm gonna play a guy who I know the volume is gonna be there. The matchup on paper doesn't really scare me, so I'm gonna go ahead and play Joe Mixon at 7,000.
Nice. I can get behind it. Joe Mixon, lock it in, leaves you with 4.8 per position, and you guys can fill in that flex and DST spot. All right, I think we're all good on DraftKings, Jared.
Yes, we are. Again, guys, if you missed this or if you want to watch the stream back later in the week, Josh and I are doing it for ourselves. We're watching the week 1 look back here, and we're going to be doing the week 2 first looks. We're going to rewatch them on Thursday and Friday when we're getting our articles ready and set up, because I think it provides pretty good, just overall capturing the slate, right? You get your first look, and sometimes your first look is your best look. And honestly, that kind of was something that we're kind of working on our process with, and I think that will improve the overall building of everybody making themselves better DFS players. So again, first look sometimes is your best look. You can watch this video on YouTube. Just look and type in the search bar RotoRadar Daily Fantasy Sports. You'll find the channel. You'll be able to like and subscribe there. It's all free. And this video will be up early tomorrow morning.